second language speaking tests and learning-oriented assessment. So I'll just hand on to Fumi there.
Hello from the UK. Yeah, this is actually morning 7 in the morning. I'm reader in language assessment in CRELA, the Center for Research in English Language Learning and Assessment, University of Bedfordshire. Nice to meet you, Edith.
Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, whatever time you are at. I'm Edith and I work as a senior lecturer at Oxford Brookes University, and I'm very much interested in pragmatic competence.
Shall we start?
Yeah.
Okay. So the title of our talk is Exploring Semi-Direct Speaking Tasks. Can we tap into pragmatic and interactional competence? In our talk, on behalf of the team of 6, including Chihiro, Caroline, and Richard, we'd like to share our research funded by the British Council that explored that new tasks that could tap into pragmatic and interactional competence in semi-direct speaking tests, as I said. And we'll be calling them PC and IC, so you will hear the acronyms quite a lot. Okay. So what motivated us to embark on this project is the well-known difficulty in operationalizing the IC construct in semi-direct speaking tests, and a lack of authenticity in communicatively oriented tasks, including pragmatic tasks, where candidates are asked to make requests, complain, or apologize. Of course, the recent development of spoken dialogue systems has a great potential for shaping a new form of assessment for speaking interaction, but it is currently not a realistic option yet, partly because it is still in a stage that makes it difficult to generate natural and complex dialogues with humans. And training the system is quite resource intensive, and not all exam providers can afford to invest in it. So our aim was to explore how we could possibly expand the construct that we can assess in computer-delivered speaking tests. We had 2 research questions. Number 1, can a computer-based speaking test tap into features of pragmatic competence at different levels? Number 2, can a computer-based speaking test tap into features of interactional competence at different levels? Okay, this was our overall research design. We first developed test specifications for PC and IC tasks and created 2 PC and 2 IC tasks accordingly. We then recruited 48 candidates from China and Austria, whose proficiency ranged from B1 to C. They firstly took a benchmarking task that was up this task 4, monologic task, followed by 2 PC and 2 IC tasks in a counterbalanced order. All performances were audio recorded. The test takers then completed a feedback questionnaire about their test-taking experience, and 12 of them were interviewed to give further insights. In developing the PC and IC tasks, we were fully aware that not all elements of PC and IC construct can be tapped into under the computer-delivered condition. So first of all, we clarified which PC and IC features can be targeted in our tasks. We had some guiding principles in our development. To enhance the authenticity of the tasks, we consider the use of visuals and videos was highly important. For the IC tasks, we wanted to include a generic clarification request after the first part of the test taker response. For the PC tasks, we carefully planned power relationships between the speaker and hearer in the 2 tasks. And we made sure that all language included in task instruction prompts were standardized and accessible to target learners. For that purpose, we extensively used English vocabulary profile and English grammar profile. Since our target output level was B2, we set all our audio and written input language to be B1 or below. The thing we'd like to note here is that we didn't mean to develop listening into speaking tasks. So we didn't want to hinder the demonstration of test takers' PC and IC skills due to a lack of understanding of listening input. So we provided some written text for scaffolding purposes on screen. We piloted our tasks prior to the main test. The pilot was really useful to decide what to and what not to present on screen. Although this was experimental research, we thought that it was very important to build detailed test specifications, and we used socio-cognitive pro forma that was also used in the APTIS speaking test, as well as other skills. Edith and Ling are going to talk about that shortly. Okay, it is really pity that we can't play the actual recordings here, but here we have some screenshots taken from the PC and IC tasks. We just used Microsoft PowerPoint to develop and deliver these tasks, embedding audio and video files. Okay, so how did we analyze the data set? We firstly asked the 2 trained raters to score the benchmarking performances, and when there were discrepancies, we invited a 3rd rater. All test takers were categorized into 3 levels accordingly: B1, B2, and C. All PC and IC recordings were transcribed and analyzed for interactional moves and for pragmalinguistic devices. Interactional moves were more like macro categories such as acknowledging speaker's point of view, projecting upcoming disagreement, and pragmalinguistic devices were micro categories of lexical features such as downtoner, upgrader, and brightness marker. Survey responses were analyzed with descriptive statistics. Semi-structured interview recordings were transcribed and thematically analyzed. We identified 14 main themes. Now, Edith is going to share some findings about pragmatic tasks.
Okay, thank you, Fumi. Okay. Yes, so in terms of the PC tasks and the pragmatic competence, we were focusing on a number of features, and these are our task specifications. And so these were the skills that we were trying to elicit and focus on in terms of pragmatic competence. So we're looking at the ability to structure, participants' ability to structure speech. So include pre-expansion features, for example, projecting upcoming requests, providing reason for the request, and to see how well they are able to connect these different features. And we were also looking at how sensitive they are to the social power relationship between the interlocutors and whether they show awareness of contextual factors. And of course, we're also looking at the micro features of pragmalinguistic devices that Fumi has just talked about. Okay, and so the data was coded and a number of moves had been identified. And so this figure shows the mean occurrence of these moves at the different levels. As you can see, the yellow represents B1, blue is B2, and the green is C. Now, I'd like to highlight a couple of features in terms of interactional moves. So if you look at the ones highlighted in black with the black circle, as you can see, at all 3 levels, participants use the number of these moves. One of them is the account. The first one, second one is the main request, and the last one is the acknowledging the hearers or listeners situation. Now, my comment about these is that these were actually included in the task instructions. So participants just took this information and included that in their speech. And as I said, all levels, they use them extensively. If you look at the other 3 highlighted in purple, the first one is a problem statement, so stating what the problem is. The second one was face-related statement, so anything to soften what you are saying because you're looking at the speaker's face, either own or the listener's face. And the last one is projecting the upcoming request. Now these ones, the interesting thing about these ones is that they were not included in the task instructions. And if you look at their mean occurrence, then it's visible, it's noticeable how their occurrence increased with increased proficiency. So that was very interesting to see that this was a definite difference between the different proficiency levels in terms of moves. And now I'd like to show you a couple of samples from participant speech. Like this one is a B1 sample. So the task was they had to change their presentation time with a classmate. And this participant, this is how they structured their speech. So yes, Connie, responding to a greeting from the interlocutor. I feel very bad and you have to run and see the doctor because I'm sick, I was sick. So they provided a background to their request. So could you exchange with me for tomorrow's presentation at 3 p.m? There came the request and a little bit of persuasion at the end. You know, it won't affect your scores. And just to exchange, so that's probably they were trying to repeat the request. So as you can see, the structure and build up to the request is very basic, very simple. It's there, but you know, it's really basic and very simple. While if you look at the C sample, even just look at it, you can see how much more structured it is, how many more pre-expansion features have been involved. So yes, everything is fine with me. So they responded to the greeting. I heard that you've taken a part-time job recently. Congratulations. That's very independent of you. I'm so admire. So this is what I called it as a face-related statement, because they were really looking at the listener and trying to ensure that their request will be received positively and possibly granted. That's how I imagine why they might have used something like this. And then, listen, I have a favor to ask, projecting the upcoming request. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. So another face-related statement, but this time probably protecting their own face, because they're talking about how embarrassed they are about asking this request. And look, we have a presentation tomorrow this week, and my original time is 3 p.m. tomorrow. So they provided a nice account there, and finally came the request. And I was thinking if you can exchange time with me. So as you can see, that the build up to the actual request is very elaborate, including a lot of moves and really focusing on the listener as well. So not just what they want to do with this request, the listener and how well their request will be received. And it's interesting to look at a couple of words here as well. I just underline listen, look. So really focusing on the listener. And I think that was for me a really interesting feature to see in C speech. And
thank you, Edith. Now I'll introduce the IC findings, the Interactional Competence findings. So as with the PC tasks, we sort of developed quite detailed specifications, and these clearly identified the features of the test, the features of the input, and the features of the expected response. For the IC tasks, we designed the task to elicit the candidate's ability to disagree, to put forward a point of view effectively, to provide some justification for that point of view, to link their contribution to the hypothetical interlocutors, to work towards a decision by trying to persuade their partner, to acknowledge the partner's views, to demonstrate that they've been listening carefully, and to be able to clarify and or to restate point that they've made. So I just want to point out a few sort of interesting findings here in terms of the 3 levels. So when we look at that, the first sort of circle there is with ED. ED is explicit disagreement. That's when someone comes out and says something like, I don't agree with you. And we can see that that was mainly found in the B1 level. And, you know, candidates in B2 and C levels were not really explicitly disagreeing. They were a little bit more sophisticated about the way they went about persuading their hypothetical interlocutor. The second sort of circle there is around projecting upcoming disagreement. And we can see there that, you know, candidates were doing it at all levels, but it was most likely to occur, more commonly occurring at the C level there. The next circle there is around a really interesting phenomenon. So if you remember back to the sort of the features that this task was designed to elicit, one of those features was being able to acknowledge your partner's point of view. So what we have here in the APVC is actually what's called a concurring concession. So it's a way of acknowledging a partner's point of view, but it's doing it in a way that you seem to be concurring with the speaker's point of view, but what you're actually doing is preparing the ground to then sort of to be retaken in a subsequent move. So we can see that this way of acknowledging a point of view was much more likely to be seen at the C level, for C level test takers. The last point I just want to bring your attention to is the AG. So AG meant explicitly agreeing to the request to clarify or exemplify your last point. And as we can see, this was happening to a certain extent at all levels, but was more likely to occur at the B2 and C levels. This was interesting to us because we actually thought that this was one way of demonstrating an aspect of interactive listening. So the candidate had been asked, you know, could you please clarify your last point or explain it in different words? And they were actually able to explicitly respond to that by saying yes, or yes, sure, I can do that. All right, I'm just going to share a sort of a sample of a sort of response at a B1 and a C level with you. So we can just have a look at what some of these features actually look like in terms of the candidate response. So I've just highlighted some things here. Here's a B1 response. The context for this is that the task is for this student to try and persuade Jan to change her mind about group presentations and actually to try and change her mind into thinking that individual presentations are better than group presentations. So we can see here this candidate greets Jan, goes into that very explicit disagreement immediately, is able to orient to Jan, you know, you said, you say, so there's definitely, you know, being able to acknowledge a point of view. If we go down a little bit further, some sort of persuasive, you know, have you thought that? And then the last thing I'd just like to highlight about this B1 sample is the last row there. So in response to the question, which was, could you please clarify your response, there's no actual, you know, yes or yes, sure I can. This student just goes straight into repeating their last point. Let's have a look at a C sample. And as with Edith's sort of examples at those different levels, you can see, you know, a much fuller response immediately, okay, here. So what we see here is this, this sort of ability to acknowledge with a concurring concession. And that's actually, there's a series of 3 acknowledgements with concurring concessions here. So, you know, things like, this is a really difficult situation you have there, Dan. I totally understand. So the context of this task was that the test taker was trying to persuade Dan to change his mind about going on a holiday by himself, and was trying to persuade Dan that holidays with friends are better. Okay, so, you know, a lot of sort of empathy and concurring concessions there. You know, you can probably do that better when you're alone. Yes, that's the point that you made. Okay. And then there's sort of these moves around sort of counter views. Again, including Dan, you know, your friends are supposed to be spontaneous. And then a very sort of persuasive, so why not? So actually inviting Dan to change his opinion there. And then there's the end of this first part is, you know, quite persuasive. I would do it. All right. Then we can see that in response to the question, you know, can you please clarify your last point? There's an explicit response to that. Yes, of course. And then, in fact, this candidate is able to not just repeat their last point, but give another example to clarify it. Okay, so that's those 2 examples there. The last bit of data I'd like to just sort of mention to you are some findings from the survey and the interviews. So just very briefly, I've highlighted 2 findings that we found to be very positive, very encouraging. When we asked candidates, you know, I knew who I had to communicate with in these tasks, almost 94% of them said yes, okay, that they did know. And we felt that that really pointed to the importance of the video in this. And then the next one, to understand Dan and Dan's point, the video was helpful or very helpful. Again, almost 94% of candidates agreed that it was. So a couple of comments there, it was definitely better with videos, you know, it's a bit more human, a bit more realistic. The other comment there, which is really important, speaks to authenticity. So we also asked candidates about whether, you know, for example, persuading someone to change their mind would be typical of real life. Would it happen in your real life? And, you know, the response from a candidate here, yeah, I think it happens at any time. It's quite common in our daily life. So just to wrap up some very brief conclusions, we felt that our findings definitely do point to the possibility, to the affordances of semi-direct speaking tasks to elicit a range of pragmatic competence features and also a selected range of interactional competence features. So we feel that there's the possibility here to broaden the construct in terms of what's possible for semi-direct tests of speaking. So really importantly, we felt that candidates knew, you know, felt that they knew who they were talking to. So that awareness of audience is really important. And, you know, that a lot of what they were saying was actually quite specifically directed to the speaker. Okay, so to the hypothetical interlocutor and to the listener, you know, so that was really, really important. We must, you know, acknowledge that even, you know, within a level, there's a definite range of performances, okay? So that, you know, that's important to identify there. But just to sort of wrap up, we do feel that there's some really encouraging implications for possibilities for eliciting IC and PC through semi-direct speaking tasks. So thank you very much on behalf of the team, and now I hope we've got some time for questions.
Thank you all very much indeed. It was very interesting to listen to. We do have one question that's been typed. We may have 1 or 2 others after that. So the question that was typed earlier is from Chris Conrad. So I'll just read it out, and one of you can choose to answer it. So the question from Chris is, what would make a spoken dialogue system or systems to generate spoken interaction more realistic as an option?
Shall I go first? Thank you, Chris, for the question. Actually, that was not really part of our research, not within the scope of our research, but generally the difficulty is the automatic speech recognition first, because we are talking about L2 speech, second language speakers speech. I think you're talking about this question is about testing context. So although word error rate with native speakers is now very small, like, I don't know, 3% or 4%. But when we talk about L2 learners, especially at low levels, like CEFR A level or maybe B1, it is quite difficult for the machine to recognize the speech appropriately, accurately. So if the machine doesn't succeed in the first step of spoken dialogue system, making speech into text, then everything else is going to be wrong. So that is actually major change, the first major change we have. And if you know IBM's project debater, actually the technology is there. The machine can make really nice debate with world champion of for debate. But again, debate is sort of series of monologues, and also the example the IBM shows is from native speaker. So if the chunk of speech is sort of contained, self-contained, and the theme is really explicit and coherent, then the machine can make really nice dialogues. But here we are talking about interactional and pragmatic competence. which requires series of short turns. So that actually makes it really difficult because the machine can't really tell what intention we have behind like 3 words, 4 words in a turn.
Thank you very much. We do have another question from Joanna. I'll read that out and one of you can just opt to answer it. So the question from Joanna Motteram is, do you think that the difficulties around the distinction of criterial features with levels is linked to the cumulative nature of expression of interpersonal meanings? Who would like to field that question?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have an intro. I don't think we expressed that there was a difficulty in identifying criterial features. It was just that was a range within, certain levels. My feeling about that, Joanna, is that it was because we anchored the performances to a monologue, which was a typical aptus task. So, it was sort of circular logic in a sense that, okay, students had performed at a C1 level in that monologic task, so therefore they were C1. So what I think really interests all of us is perhaps to as a next sort of thing to think about is simply to look at the performances and then, let the performances speak in a sense without necessarily saying here's a C1 candidate and this is what they're doing. Maybe, I'm not sure whether I've answered your question, but hopefully a bit of it.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. I think this is more a question regarding clarification of something. This is from Rie Koizumi. The question is, did your prompt clearly state who is the listener and what is expected in this task?
Edith, would you like to have a go?
Sorry?
Edith, would you like to answer the question?
Yeah, that's right. It was clarified who they were talking to, I think, and in the interview it came across as well that they knew exactly who they were talking to. So it was specified who this person was, what their role was, and that the students identified straight away, at least in pragmatic tasks as well. Okay, where do I stand socially to this person as well, which was really interesting to hear. So yes, it was clarified and very clear to students.
Yes, when we made videos, we made sure to recruit actors at the specific age so that if it is peer, they really look like really young peer rather than someone above their age. So we try to make sure that visually and also conceptually on screen it says, here you have a classmate talking about this and that. So we try to make it as clear as possible.
Thank you very much. That brings us right to the end, and thank you so much again, guys, for that presentation. It was really interesting to listen to, and obviously people are quite engaged as well. We had a lot of participants in this session. So